Paradoxical leadership combines two very important competencies. One of them being long-term, very strategic, setting a vision, a direction of the company. Short-term, that requires adaptability, flexibility, and potentially change. Paradoxical leadership to me enables the combination of being strategic and agile.
Good morning, Astrid. How are you doing today?
Good morning to you as well. I'm good. I'm very good. Dialing in from Minnesota in the US.
Yeah, Astrid, first of all, thank you very much and welcome to the Leadership Equation podcast. I can't wait to go through this, detailed conversation with you. As a start, Astrid, in one of our recent conversation, you brought up a very important topic, and that was about paradoxical leadership. Uh, Ever since, I'm actually hooked onto that topic. I've read up, but for our viewers and listeners, I'd love for you to unpack what is paradoxical leadership and why is it so important in the current business environment, in the current day and age?
Yes, it is a topic that I am obsessed about as well, to be honest. I've put 37 years of my career behind me, and now that I am in a retiring slash rewiring phase, I have time to reflect on all the learnings I've had over this period of time.
Right.
And, people define leadership so many different ways, but what I've learned through my career is that leadership can be defined as a very dynamic competence. And it is also part of the relational process, dealing with people, dealing with different stakeholders inside and outside of the company. But paradoxical leadership in the environment that we live in, which is quite uncertain, there is a lot of ambiguity, lots of change happening. Paradoxical leadership combines two very important competencies. One of them being long-term, very strategic, setting a vision, a
Mm.
direction of the company, and one that is more short-term that requires adaptability, flexibility, and potentially change.
Mm.
And as you think about what does being strategic mean, it is really an organizational commitment to a future state.
Yeah.
Being agile requires organizations to be fast and nimble and quick in decision making and changing the direction to some degree. So, paradoxical leadership to me enables the combination of being strategic and agile.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
what it is all about.
Does it also mean, Astrid, that it's like you were saying, it's being macro and micro, it's being long term and short term both at the same time. In fact, it reminds me of a quote that I had read a few years back, which again stayed with me because it was so intriguing. I think Fitzgerald talked about this thing that, I think he spoke about this thing that the first grade intelligence is something where an individual is able to hold two opposing thoughts at the same time, yet function. Is that something similar?
Very similar because you introduce contradictions in this whole
Yeah,
concept of paradoxical leadership
yeah,
because the direction, the long-term direction is really important to understand where we're headed. But how you get there may have to be tweaked uh, depending on the external factors. So you're absolutely right. It introduces tensions, it introduces contradictions, and leading in an environment like that where you have these emotions in a
yeah,
company can be good if you know how to master and how to manage them.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That followership of the whole organization behind you to still get to that end game, that
yeah,
strategic point in the future.
yeah. No, that makes a great deal of sense. Let's dive into a few themes that I really wanted to cover with you today. Astrid. You have had a fascinating journey. You spent time at two organizations of great repute. You've spent about 17 years at Eaton, and then you've spent about 5 years with Danfoss. If I take that journey and go to a theme, which is what does it take to build organizations that last a very long time? Uh, in your experience, in your journey, what's that process that allows organizations to be really enduring and stand the test of time?
Well, first of all, never get caught in the here and now. You have to have this mindset of the future, right? Where you're going, where you're heading, and that commitment that I mentioned earlier. But let's take a look at the world that we're living in and working in. It's
Mm,
fast paced, it is highly competitive, as I mentioned earlier, full of uncertainties, and we're constantly dealing with ambiguity. You never have 100% of the answers at your fingertips. So you have to make the best decision with the information you have available. So,
right.
given that, you know, leaders have to think about how to create an enduring franchise. And the key is mastering this contradiction and balancing tensions, and sometimes even introducing tensions in the company to get the best insights from opposing sides to help leaders make the decision. And that is called strategic agility. It's a bit like it's a bit like a paradox. It's a bit like a yin and yang, right? And examples would be: do you want growth or do you want profitability?
Yeah,
You want
yeah,
both, right?
yeah,
Do you want the long term or the short term? Well, it's easy. You want both. Do you want to
yeah,
be stable or you want to have flexibility? You want both. And so it introduces this concept of this and that.
right.
And leaders who can juggle these two mindsets, who can do both, are the ones who can stay ahead of the game, stay ahead of the competition, and create organizations that last in perpetuity, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. Specifically, or maybe if I were to go one level deeper, the rate at which, let's say, technology or domain changes are coming, it's becoming faster and faster through passage of time, which basically means that one is spending a lot of time thinking about agility, thinking about pivoting to newer strategies, technologies, competencies, etc., which is reasonably short term. How does then one think about long, or rather, how does one promote long-term thinking? If I were to just pick that one area and really thinking through what does it take for an organization to, let's say, see the next 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, rather than the next 3, 4 quarters.
That's a terrific question because it's so easy to be caught in the here and now, right? Most companies have a process called strategic planning processes. And
Right,
processes are 5 years out. You look ahead 5 years and you do an assessment of the market, the customers, the competitors, your own position, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you develop a strategic plan with the information you know today, right?
right,
Where this fails very often is in the execution phase. The plan has been developed and created across many stakeholders, and you get buy-in to the plan. But where it can fail is in the execution phase.
right,
And what I mean by that is when you deploy a strategic plan with such long-term views in an organization, you have to make sure the organization understands it in the
right,
deployment phase. But then
right,
leaders also have to support the initiatives in the plan. Doesn't mean they can change things because of the external environment
Right.
that's thrust at them, right?
Right.
But when the funding isn't there, when the resource allocations aren't there, when the support is maybe delayed or maybe not there, then a strategy cannot be developed, and it becomes just a pretty document in a folder.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what is the hardest part. Rather than just develop a pretty document, just make sure that this document gets deployed in a proper way. It's aligned globally with all stakeholders. You get buy-in and unity.
Mm,
And you have to support it and make it happen. And that
yeah.
requires both money, and it requires people, and it requires support in my book and my learnings.
It actually is a nice segue to go into, would like to think, is the most important section of our conversation today, which is building capability at scale for institutions that operate globally. Astrid, you have had a great and fascinating journey building the business operations for the capability centers or operations that Danfoss Eaton has had in India. Uh, Today, they are called the Global Capability Centers or GCCs. Uh, you've, again, in the past spoken about not just viewing that as a capability center, but also as a competency center. Just unpack it for us, please.
So my journey with India started in 2004. It's quite some time ago. And I want to say it was very progressive thinking on behalf of Eaton at the time, thinking that we can build scale, we can build competencies, we can nurture our customers, we can develop products out of a center like this in India. Why India, right? That it
Yeah,
begs the
yeah,
question, why India? Well, let
yeah,
me just give you some statistics that I had at my fingertips over quite many years. Uh, 1.4 billion people in India, right? When I started this journey in 2004, I think India was the seventh or the eighth largest economy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Today, it's the fifth largest economy with an ambition to become the third largest economy.
That's right.
India just kicked off the UK and became the fifth
Mm,
largest economy. It is a country with a very young demographic profile.
yeah,
India has so much potential, and it I think has a future of becoming a powerhouse
mm,
in the world theater. And what's even more important is that India produces, if I remember the numbers correctly, around 10 million graduates every single year. Okay. So it's a young society, 10 million graduates every single year. When I started the journey, I was mostly interested in engineering. And at the time, India produced 1 million engineers a year. Today, I think it's a little bit higher than that. So, with all of this dynamic and all of this talent that gets trained and developed during
yeah.
their years in university, it's a prime market to tap into this talent. The talent pool is what excited me the most. Every time I come to India, and I've been to India many, many times during this period of 21
20
years,
years.
yeah,
Yeah,
I realize the skilled talent pool that is at our fingertips.
yeah.
There's strong government support, and the infrastructure is improving. I remember how India looked in 2004 and how India looks today. It's
Right,
exponential in terms of support and investment and talent. And
right,
all of these factors is a prime destination for multinational companies looking to grow and expand their operations. But there are potential obstacles that companies need to be aware of in how to implement a center like